gotta tell somebody.
This is the best thing I've ever seen.
Let's talk about that.
Listen to this.
Memorable and exciting.
Well, then be less boring.
I'm gonna tell everyone. Wait here.
Mighty remarkable, Big Daddy.
Remarkable.
Welcome to Remarkable, a podcast for B2B marketers that deconstructs the most iconic moments in film, television, pop culture, and advertising for a single purpose: to give you, the B2B marketer, the same storytelling techniques that the pros use. In each episode, you will learn techniques from Hollywood, Pixar, Marvel, and beyond, from Spielberg's hands to yours, bringing remarkable content ideas to you every single week. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. This is Remarkable. This week, we're talking about B2B marketing lessons from Ghosts, the UK version, of course, with Director of Content Strategy at Acquia, Courtney Roe. Courtney, how are you?
Hi, Ian. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Excited to get into Ghosts, talk about Acquia, talk about content. So let's start with, why the heck did you choose the UK version of Ghosts?
Yeah, so I kind of did pick both of them, but the reason that I kind of got into Ghosts is because I've been living in London for the last 5 years, and it's been really fascinating just noticing the difference between Americans and Brits.
I'm Samantha, this is Jay. We're fixing the place up.
This house is a disaster.
He's not wrong. This place looks haunted. I mean, it is haunted, but you don't want people to think that.
Not only that, but I have a lot of friends who are expats too, so mostly from Australia and South Africa. So just learning about the subtle differences, even though we all speak the same language, but there's just different ways that things come through. So I thought that was really interesting. And one of the things that I've noticed in a lot of my conversations is that American TV, seemingly tends to find its way into many other cultures. And it usually comes over into those countries and those cultures as is. Whereas when shows from other countries make it to the US, especially just up until recently, there tended to be an adaptation of that show to adapt for humor and format and storylines in order for it to become, a hit stateside. So that was something that I always thought was interesting. And then I just absolutely love history. So I've always kind of wondered, how people from different times would get along with each other. And I think that this is, although a very oversimplified enactment of those potential relationships, I still think it's fun to see and to watch it play out.
And zooming out, tell us a little bit about your role at Acquia.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm the Director of Content Strategy. So I sit on the content and communications team at Acquia. I'm really driven by telling a consistent story across all of our owned channels, especially our acquia.com domain. So I really spend a lot of time thinking about what is on all of our different sites and how we can be consistent across all of them. And then how to bring in new content when an acquisition happens. So I actually came to Acquia as part of an acquisition in 2021. At my previous company, Widen, we spent a lot of time and effort focused on inbound and content marketing. So we really wanted to protect that and what we built when we brought it over to Acquia. We really had to consider the best way to bring it into acquia.com. And now we're actually going through the process of bringing in another acquired site. And so we're learning from everything that we did to bring over Widen. And then obviously trying to bring Moncito is the other company that we're bringing over now. So all the work that we did with Widen is actually making this migration much faster and easier than the previous one.
Meredith, what the heck is Ghosts?
So Ghosts started as a British TV show, and it's basically about this couple who inherits an old house in the English countryside. And it's the wife who inherits it from this distant relative who she didn't even know she had. And she decides, basically against all advice, to sell the place, that she and her husband are actually going to keep it and try to renovate it, turn it into a luxury hotel.
That is Meredith O'Neill, our amazing producer extraordinaire.
What they don't know is that the house is teeming with ghosts, and they're all from different time periods, which I thought was really interesting because when you think of ghosts, you think of a woman, like a Victorian woman in a white dress. But these are like from all different time periods, male, female, even a Neanderthal.
Robin, you've been here a while. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
One time, yes, but it was a bear. Oh, the bear was like, "Wah!" And I'm like, ah! And then he's like, oh, okay. And I'm like, whoa! And the bear's like, hey, was he normally? You had to be there.
And so the ghosts are angry at this new couple's plans to, what they're going to do to the place. And so they are conspiring against the couple. And at one point, one of the ghosts pushes the woman, Allison, out a window, and she has this near-death experience. She wakes up from this induced coma, and all of a sudden, she can see the ghosts.
Although this part of the building
You're not real.
Well, we're not alive, but we are.
I can't hear you.
Well, clearly you can, because...
No, I can't.
Well, it's just you keep answering me,
No, I don't.
why...
And so now she knows what's going on in this old house. They have all sorts of things come up between them, but they eventually decide, the couple and the ghosts decide to coexist as best they can because they're both bound to the house for different reasons, right? The ghosts are just bound to the house until they call it being sucked off, as they say, into the afterlife. And the couple ends up being bound to the house because the husband, while the wife, Allison, is in a coma, the husband, Mike, gets a mortgage on the house so that they can start to renovate it. So long story short, it's kind of this, what the co-creator Matt Bainton described as an extreme version of an awkward flat share sitcom. And so it's people from all sorts of walks of life just trying to coexist together and make it happen. But it stars Charlotte Ritchie as Allison, the wife of the couple, and Keel Smith Bino as Mike. Some of the ghosts, and there's like a pretty extended cast, but some of the ghosts are Lolly Adefope, who plays this Georgian noblewoman, Kitty Higham, Matthew Bainton, who is also one of the co-creators, as Regency poet Thomas Thorne, and Lawrence Rickard as the caveman. Again, that's among many others. And they all sort of manifest as they died. So there's like a scout leader with an arrow through his neck. There's a headless guy. But the show is written and performed by a collective known as Them There. It's produced by Monumental Pictures as part of ITV Studios, and it's broadcast on BBC One, but no longer. Its last season ended last year at Christmas. So it aired from 2019 to 2023. So as we were talking about previously, Courtney, it's had 5 seasons and it's just delightful. Like, I'm just getting into it, and I'm so excited, Courtney, that you brought it into my sort of sphere, because it's my new show that I want to binge. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, I'm so glad, because it's one of my favorites. Like, I love the characters. I love the storylines. I love like the grittiness of the British humor. It's just a really fun show.
It's so charming. So I also wanted to share a little bit about like the making of it, because this was something that I thought was really interesting, because we haven't talked about like a group of people who all come together as like a troupe, right? And each of them have their fair share, and each of them, like, it's so fair the way they go about it. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. But to go back to co-creator Matt Bainton, he says part of this like extreme flat share sitcom concept, he said about like storytelling and that sort of topic, he said, every time you have people stuck in a place together, you'll find natural enmity and antagonism. So here, for example, you have the most uptight Edwardian matriarch.
No, you heathen! Spoon on the outside! Spoon on the outside! Oh, I can't look.
And her opposite, a caveman.
Bum.
Right.
Bum or neck or leg. But first choice, bum.
Is it cooked?
Of course, I'm not animal.
Could have fooled me.
Hey, you want some?
All right.
Well.
And so I thought from a storytelling perspective, that's a really interesting sort of technique to create drama, to create tension. But to go back to this troupe, it's 6 writers, and they initially worked together on a children's TV show called Horrible Histories. And then they reunited to make a sitcom called Yonderland. And so Ghost is their most recent collaboration, which they started when Yonderland was sort of like winding down. And so they were coming up with these ideas, and it was actually one of their very first ideas. Bainton said it was hard to come up with stories. That was sort of like why they sort of postponed doing a sort of ghost story. He said, as unlike most comedies, the characters can't really worry about life or death stuff. So once we cracked the idea that they'd face boredom and eternity, that released it from this vague idea. And then each of the 6 members sort of sat down and they made a character for each of them to play. So not only are they writing, they are also playing the characters.
What do you actually want? Specifically, you.
Right. I'll tell you what we want. We demand that
1 hour a week of the thing about tanks and anything on super weapons, please. Thank you.
They each take turns leading the episodes. So they, sort of rotate who takes the lead on each one. And all 6 have equal creators credit on the series. And then Baton said for each episode, we begin and end around the same table. Roughly, we'll come up with a story, characters, and series outline. Then we go away and write and then regroup and give each other frank and honest notes. It's productive and fast. You get 6 first drafts in about the same time as you'd normally get 1. But we have an identity that a writer's room doesn't. There are such disparate people there that you need a showrunner. And so I thought this was really interesting because it's like you are brainstorming like individually and then you're coming back together. It's faster, he said, right? So, and you get like all of these different ideas. You make sure everyone gets a turn and then they all get their due credit. And so that was like a way that I feel like if you're strapped for time as a content creator and you're working on a team, like each split up, come back together and then share your ideas. And that seemed like a really efficient way to, come up with new content. A couple other lessons I thought that was interesting just from like the creation of the show is pair characters with their opposites to create sort of tension and drama. And then get characters stuck in a situation together that they can't escape. They're forced to be in and they have to kind of like work their way through everything. Like I was thinking of like being trapped in an elevator from You've Got Mail or working in an office together from The Office, obviously. So you like sort of get all of this like natural drama and tension just from being stuck in a situation together. So I thought all of that was interesting. And I love that they pick ghosts from all different time periods. Courtney, I know you mentioned like you love history. If you were to like play a character that's coming back from history, what time period, like what sort of character do you think you'd play?
I don't know. I've always loved the 20s. So, but I feel like that's not far enough back. And obviously 1920s. Not now. But yeah, and I think too the something medieval, like something with castles and all that stuff though. I always think that, you'd be the princess or you'd be like living in the castle when I know that I'd actually be one like the peasants in the village, like at the court's whim and all of that stuff, which is sad to think about. But I will pretend that I actually live in the castle and, get to go to grand feasts and balls all the time.
Oh,
well, you're royalty here, Courtney. I can tell you that much.
That's right.
Thank you. I will look for my crown in the mail.
You can be an aristocrat at our remarkable dinners. It's really a fun idea, Meredith. The show has a lot of really cool sort of ideas and premises that you talked about, but I love the idea of having, people from different time periods as something that are, is going to be so different no matter what. And there's so many funny things that you can explore of people like, with that. So I think that's interesting, but it's also interesting the idea of like, life or death stakes aren't there.
Wait. Annie? Who's Annie?
Did we never tell you?
Oh, yeah. Annie ghosted here for 100 years or more. True friend to me.
See.
Till she got sucked off.
I'm sorry. Like moved on.
Oh, yeah, there's many that's been sucked off in this house.
Moved on.
I used to dream of the day that I would be sucked off.
Moved on.
But I've long since given up hope of ever being sucked off.
Moving on.
But it kind of brought me to the business analogy, which is virtually never are we dealing with life or death stakes in the business world. So we never even go to those extremes anyways. Like, if you don't buy the software, like you're not going to die, like your company's probably not going under even in the company sense if you don't buy this software. We like to push sort of like, well, if you're not doing this, you're not at the cutting edge, or if you don't have AI, or if you whatever. And I'm sure that that's true, like to a certain point that, if your company doesn't embrace innovation, like you won't be around for a long time. But broadly speaking, you're probably still going to be able to like carve out a career for yourself. Like, you're still going to be able to feed your family. If something happens to your job and you have a career and at some point you'll find another job. Like, so there's just really not really the stakes in B2B marketing. And so I kind of thought that was an interesting idea for us, is like, how do you create stakes when sometimes there aren't?
No, I definitely agree with that though, because I think that there are so many times when, you have fire drills and everything else is kind of coming at you. And I think sometimes it helps to take a step back and realize it's not life or death. Yes, you need to be successful. Yes, you want to do different things. And I think my perspective definitely changed a little bit over the last few years when I looked at it more as like learning something new or solving a different challenge as opposed to kind of having like some looming threat or something. So yeah, so like most of the time when I walk away from like a difficult meeting or something else, I'm like, oh, what did I learn here? Or what can I take away that's maybe going to help me in a situation next time? So yeah, I think sometimes it just becomes a shift in thinking to realize that no, it's not the end all be all.
So back to the show creation process, which I find extremely fascinating. I still can't wrap my head around how they do it. So they all write separate drafts of the episode and then come together and then jam those ideas together.
That's what it sounded like.
Right?
Yeah. Which seems
I
like
had no idea.
A lot that gets probably not used.
And maybe you use it for other episodes or things like that. It's really fascinating. When I first heard that, I thought, wow, this actually kind of sounds like a B2B company. Because there's so many times where you get in a big group of people, or more or less like a lot of the people on there are all, maybe they're not peers, but a lot of people who, maybe someone's a senior director and someone's a director or someone's, a senior manager, or they're on a different team, but functionally they're not like over each other. It's a lot of just stakeholders. And they have different ideas of what the thing is. And gosh, I don't know, Courtney, how you feel about this, but any project that I've been in where there's 6 or more people trying to make a decision on anything is absolutely horrible. So
yeah.
It's crazy to think that they write this show this way.
Yeah, I had no idea that that's how they actually wrote the show. And you can kind of see it in the way that they play with each other in the scenes and stuff. And I do feel like there is kind of, as you mentioned, Meredith, an equal amount of screen time for them too. Like there's not really one character that takes over the other, which is quite interesting.
I just wanted to say hello.
Hello.
Oh, hello.
I really wonder if a lot of that has to do with just trust. And trust in like that everybody around that table has the best interest of the show at heart and the characters at heart and all of that stuff. And so I do think that can be brought back to B2B marketing. And I think that's because I have a lot of people in my team that I know and trust will be looking after the same things that I'm looking after. And so a lot of times we will have conversations and I end up asking a lot more questions about things to help get to the root of something. And I think one of my main goals in looking at our own channels and across everything is that I take a much less siloed view of everything. I'm looking much more horizontally at kind of how everything works together. And so when I'm brought into conversations, it's mostly to think about all of those other different things that are happening in some of the other different parts of the business and different aspects of the business, so that then I can say, oh, well, this is already happening here. So could we consider this for this, and kind of bringing them together that way? So I'm looking for that best interest of everybody and trying to understand like what each part of the business is trying to accomplish. And I think that that's starting to be done in different sectors of the business too, which I think is going to build up that trust and is going to allow you to have kind of better processes and better guardrails to be able to bring something together holistically and cohesively, which I think that they do well in Ghosts.
Very fun. In fact, sometimes I call it fun-do.
Yeah, indeed. One thing that struck me too as something pretty fascinating is the idea that you could have different people on your team be representative of different personas. And some companies kind of do this a little bit. Like the team at Zora, they have like audience marketing managers where they sort of think about that. A lot of product marketers are sort of like naturally kind of that way, is, they're thinking about a specific persona based off of their product. But again, that's more about product, not necessarily persona. But the idea, if you were to go create content and use those people as sort of the stand-ins for their persona, I think is pretty fascinating. And the idea of like giving them a little bit more human characteristics rather than just like as a buying person, right? I think is also pretty interesting. But I like the idea that you have people around the table that represent their persona. Did you ever hear the Howard Schultz, who created, Starbucks, his thing? I'm gonna butcher this, but basically his thing is every decision that he ever made for Starbucks, he imagined that he was sitting in a room and there was like a customer there and like his mom there and an employee there and like a shareholder there or something like that. And that he made every single decision thinking that as if they were in the room sort of there with him. I could be totally wrong on the details of that, but generally speaking, that's what it was. And so I thought that when thinking about like the creation of this show and how they sort of have this, 6-person troupe that they're able to do this, that I wonder if having, playing a character and being able to think in that way probably helps them write it.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I think, it's interesting because I work with our UX content team a lot too, to think about kind of the different personas. And obviously we've got a product marketing team that thinks about personas, but there's a lot more testing that goes into it from a UX perspective too, about how names resonate with different personas and different audiences and everything like that. And so we do have a lot more conversations with different parts of the business that are in touch more with the customers and with just different users in general, which I do think helps kind of get an understanding to at least even think about who might be coming to the site and who might need our products. And so I think that makes it a little bit easier to consider all of those people in that room.
What were your big B2B marketing takeaways from Ghosts, Courtney?
Yeah. So I think my big takeaways really were that, I was comparing it kind of to the US version because it has been adapted to the US.
Babe, it's so charming. What could possibly be wrong with it?
And so, it's actually really been successful in the US too, which I thought was pretty cool. And the fact that like on Rotten Tomatoes, both the US and the UK version are at 96%. And that doesn't really happen all the time. Like I even looked up the Office, and the US version is at 81%, while the UK version is at 97%. So, just like some of the differences like that. And so I was thinking about like really knowing who you are and as you're bringing, especially if you're thinking about migrating a site, like any product or company that has been acquired they're going to have to ultimately give a little bit in order to fit into the new world that they're creating. But if you have a strong foundation and really know who you are at your core, you're not going to lose that foundation, even if your name and your branding need to change along the way. So know who you are and then know your audience. Sure, you had an audience that got you to this point that could shift when you're brought into a larger company. Then transition doesn't happen immediately, obviously. So you need to find that right mix of like what worked for your initial audience and then how it might need to shift to appeal to a new one. And then also just like learning from others that came before you. So I'm sure that there's some course somewhere on the psychology of adapting TV shows for different audiences, just as there are books and articles about like migrating websites. And whatever you can learn from those or those who have gone before you and even your own previous experiences, like definitely take those lessons into consideration. They're going to provide you with that good foundation, but ultimately it's really going to come down to you and educated decisions and trial and error to kind of keep going. But definitely keep good records each time so that you don't have to keep learning the same lessons and can learn new lessons. So yeah, just learning from others that came before you too.
I mean, what sort of moron believes in ghosts?
You are a ghost.
Well, yeah, but, before I became one, you wouldn't have caught me believing in this sort of nonsense.
Yeah, that's great. Do you feel like, as you were sort of looking at your process with these sort of massive migrations and changing all of these, when you're coming at it you came at it originally as the acquired company, and then now you're, the acquiring company, that's sort of like blending the two marketing visions in addition to the sort of content visions. How was that process?
Yeah. So coming over from Wyden, we were very focused on inbound marketing and content marketing. So Acquia hadn't adopted that strategy quite as much as we had when we were coming into it. And so it was a change in how they approached it. And what I am really thankful for is that the leadership took that on board and kind of took into consideration all of the stuff that we had been doing, the things that we'd been successful with, and adopted that as a lot of their strategy. So I was we were able to change the way that we wrote blog articles and change how we were trying to get organic traffic. And then that allowed, knowing that that was our ultimate goal, that allowed us to be a little bit more considered when we brought over all of our articles and all of our, SEO rich pages from widen.com to acquia.com, so that we didn't lose as much traffic as we could have. Because if you just migrated the entire site, that would have been quicker. But we took each page and one by one moved them over, made sure that we redirected directly to the corresponding page on acquia.com. So at the end of the day, we lost very little of our organic traffic, which I'm quite proud of, because it was a hard, long thing to do, but I think that we did it the right way, especially for a company who was really focused on that inbound marketing. And so we're trying to take a similar process for Montecito. They're a smaller site with not as much focus on content marketing, but we're making sure that we get every bit of that equity and authority to bring over to Acquia and continue to grow what they've grown and combine it with everything that we have. So,
Fantastic. I love it. Yeah. Final piece here on Ghosts. I think, Meredith, I love what you said about, the 3 lessons sort of being like splitting up the brainstorm and letting people kind of go figure out their own things and then bringing those ideas together.
Kill him.
I quite agree. If we all approve the use of force to enable them to, not live anymore.
Out of the question. That's completely immoral. But it's wrong.
If we do kill them, we could be stuck with them forever.
Would that be so bad?
She's married, Thomas. Look at them.
Why must I always be spurned?
I love a good brainstorm. I love getting people together, but I have found after doing hundreds of brainstorms with B2B marketing teams specifically, that it's really important to do, but it also can be challenging, especially, remotely. And that usually you're sort of like fitting this in between a few things and a few meetings or whatever. And I think it is really important to like let people go, build something themselves and then sort of like bring it up to the larger team. I don't know how they break the tie of that group of 6 people, but in my piece on this would be, like we as Caspian, as like a vendor, we usually break the tie for like our customers. So it's easy for them to be like, hey, like Caspian sort of breaks the tie. But I think you should still have someone on your team who's like the final say, the EP. And usually that person is probably the CMO or equivalent of somebody who can do that stuff. But I like the idea of, breaking stuff off, going and working on it on your own and bringing it back to kind of come up with like a half-baked version of it. I think that's a fun exercise if you are in a place where you're stuck on something. And then the other 2 things about sort of characters.
Your own little Stonehenge.
No! Stonehenge copied!
Okay, all right.
Well...
Settle down.
I think that people, when we're writing our B2B characters, if we are even writing our B2B characters, but when we're creating a story, for our personas, and we're thinking about these things, I love the 2 ideas that this show explores, which is, number 1, putting people together that are opposites. I think there's always so much fun that you can have with that. We did an episode on Muppet theory and having a chaos Muppet and I forget what the other Muppet is called, the more straight-laced Muppet. Order Muppet, yeah. Order Muppet and Chaos Muppet together. I think that's really good. I think it's really fun to explore those type of things. I know CIOs, for example, that are total chaos Muppets. I know other ones that they're total Order Muppets. So it's really fun to be able to think about those things and play those people together. And then I fundamentally love the idea of being stuck. It's such a good feeling. Like that's what this show is about. It's about being stuck, right? It's like you can't do anything. You're in this place. And literally we wrote an entire show. The first season of Murder in HR is about being stuck. I mean, that's the core premise of season 1 is that what if you're stuck at a company and those people are extremely toxic and you have to figure out a way to navigate that? And like as an HR leader, how would you do that? And so like I love the idea of being stuck. I love the idea that people often feel stuck in business. They feel stuck because they're in their role. They feel stuck because their boss is, a jerk. They feel stuck because their company is sort of like, the stock price is slipping or, whatever it is. I think that's just a really good thing to explore of like, tell a story where your customers feel stuck, where they feel like they, can't make a decision, don't have budget to make a decision, need to figure something out, have been doing the same thing over and over again and not seeing the results that they want, of like really dig into like what that stuck feeling, is like. And then who are the other people in the room that they're stuck there with? And like, is there a way to coexist with those people and to actually make make eternity feel a little less eternal?
I think, Ian, though, on that note too, though, we've also talked about being stuck and having constraints also leads to creativity. So like, I wonder if there's something that people could use there with their marketing too, is like, you're working within certain constraints, certain whatever budget limits, you can also like have fun with that in a way too.
Totally. I mean, like, what to do in 2024 if you don't have budget for another, if you don't have the money to spend with Caspian, like if you have no money, what can you do for the next year to prep for when you do have money for us, right? Like that's always an interesting thing of like, what can you do to, help your customers have outsized impact beyond just their product? Like that's a super fascinating thing, right? We deal with that all the time with people want to work with us. And they're like, hey, I don't have money this year to do this project. I really want to do it. It got shot down. Like, what can I do in the meantime? So I think that stuff like that is really interesting. And exploring those sort of things. But I think like exploring the emotion behind it is really fascinating to me. Is like the person who's sitting there who's like, I just had this really cool project that I wanted to do. The CFO said no. And I'm pissed. And I'm so mad that I want to leave my company because this thing got canned. Like that is a very real emotion where it's like, well, if they're not going to approve my ideas, I'm going to go somewhere else. Like that's a really, I think, just powerful emotion. And I think that that's the thing that this show sort of plays on is like, this idea of being stuck with this, in this bad situation. And the thing that they have for it is like, it literally is eternal. Whereas, for us in business is like, you have the choice to leave or to do something else. But what are you going to do? Quit your job because, your software project didn't get approved? Like probably not. But I think it's worth exploring, and I don't really see it done very often. All right, Courtney, any final thoughts on the show before we dig in more to content at Acquia?
Yeah, I think my big thing is that like I love the UK version, but I also love the US version, and I think you can love things for different reasons, and they can both be special for different reasons. And so I think that that's always a good way to kind of look at different things. And so even though one might be ending, you've still got something else.
Ghosts are a real thing, and my wife talks to them now.
There's a hippie and a Viking and a guy dressed like Hamilton.
How do you know about Hamilton?
Yeah, final takeaway on that too, which I feel the same way, is that sometimes you just need a little bit of reframing for your content, that you could tell the same exact story in a slightly different way and people might pick it up, right?
This is our house.
We've been here longer than you.
Yeah, and guess what? We're alive.
Alive?
Ouch. It's like, instead of telling this from third person, tell it from first person. Instead of, telling this as, a 2,000 word article, tell it in bullet points. Instead of telling it in bullet points, do it in, a slideshow for LinkedIn. And I know that people throw around like repurposing and things like that. But, I think it's a really important exercise, not from necessarily a repurposing standpoint, but just to tell the same story in a different way. And I think that that's where that lesson of like, have your team break up, think of how they would tell the story in their own ways. And then, maybe do multiple of those options. Like you don't have to tell the exact same story just one time, just one way. But we almost always do that. We almost never go back and tell that story in a new way. So yeah, I think that's a great point of the UK versus the US version, is like, you love both, right? And some people might love the American one and some people might love the UK one and they don't want to watch the other one. That's fine too. Okay, so how do you think about content strategy at Acquia?
Yeah, so I think of it as kind of a puzzle. I feel like we've got quite a few different products, and we've got quite a few different like add-on products that go with specific products, can use them with the other ones. One of the really unique things about Acquia in general is that it's it's an open digital experience platform. So it integrates with a lot of different things. You can kind of incorporate pretty much whatever you want in order to make your platform whatever you need it to be. And so I think that it's got a lot of options. And with that, comes the challenge of telling that story. So I think I think of the content strategy with that is how to simplify telling that story and how to get it to those different audiences and giving them just what they need, because it can be overwhelming. If you're like, here's everything that we have, here's everything that we can do, like we can do almost anything. That's a lot for a person to take in. So really like finding the people, finding the stories that are going to resonate with them is what my main goal is. And finding where we want to put them on the website so that it takes them down the journey that they need to go, kind of like a choose your own adventure sort of situation, so that it gives them the information that they need to do the research, do the education before they need to contact somebody. That's kind of my general take on content strategy in general.
And then how do you think about ROI of content, or how have you had those type of conversations?
Yeah, I feel like it's always a hard conversation to have, because especially when you're doing a lot more high level educational content that's just getting the traction. So I look a lot at new users, new traffic to the website, especially like an uptick in organic traffic. For the technical edits that we do or technical SEO updates that we do, I look at domain rating, authority, all of that to see what we can do to move the needle there. And then with the correct attribution tracking, you can track to see like if they came in on this article and then maybe they came back like 5 or 6 times later and then actually fill out a form. You can start to see people moving down the funnel with that educational content. So I feel like that's how I look at ROI. And then also when you're looking at, a paid strategy and you're thinking about how much money are you putting into paid? Where are you putting more money in? What keywords are you looking at? And then working with it from an organic perspective to see if you can kind of like take your foot off the gas a little bit on those paid keywords and get that back with organic. I think that you can definitely show the ROI there when you're like, all right, well, I'm getting the same amount of traffic with organic that you were paying for with paid. So, here's where we're saving money, and let's put that somewhere else into like a harder keyword to get.
Okay. What about any cool content that you've made or pieces or anything like that you've worked on over the past year or so?
Well, I know you mentioned Acquia TV, so I didn't have a big part in that, but it is a really cool platform for everybody to go to and kind of see all of the different videos that we have together. And I think even just the visual design of it is actually really cool. Like, I think that they've done a fantastic job bringing the visuals together. So yeah, I'd say definitely go check that out.
It's really cool. I mean, people can just go check out Acquia TV, but I think it's very much a video first creation that has all of the cool stuff that you'd want, from serialized content to, customer testimonials to event stuff and in-person shooting and all that stuff. So it's very much, a very video forward content initiative, which I think is extremely, differentiates y'all a lot, and it's great. I've been checking it out.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
Anything that you're excited about coming up in the not too distant future that you're working on?
Yeah, so we've been working on it for a while to get just the site to like the site structure in place, and we're really coming around to that. I think that that bringing in Moncito is the next layer of what that navigation will look like, and so I'm really just excited to kind of bring that into the fold, and that all the work that we did leading up to this to kind of get ready for future acquisitions is coming to fruition, and that we're actually able to more seamlessly bring things in. So it feels like 2 years of work is kind of coming together, and we're able to do something easier and faster. And so I know it's not necessarily new, but it's really exciting to be able to do that quickly and semi-seamlessly, and hopefully not forgetting anything because we've got processes for it now and everything like that. So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Amazing. And final best piece of advice for someone who is leading content strategy, leading this new world of content at their company?
Yeah, I think anybody leading content, you've got to get the buy-in from everybody. It depends on how you want content to be seen at your company. I think that sometimes it's a little bit harder for people to understand how much influence a blog can have on your website traffic, or how having the right customer journey on your website can really lead people down the funnel. So I think just understanding what you want, understanding what your own strategy is. I specifically think about owned and organic traffic. So how that owned and organic traffic then works with the other traffic, so paid and earned, and how you can kind of come together. So yeah, I think just understanding what's coming in, what other people care about, and why you're doing what you're doing. I think that's the question that I ask a lot of people, is especially when they're coming to me for new pages or new content. I ask them, like, what's the point? What's the purpose? And I think having people understand that when they're coming to you for new things will really make sure that you keep a clean site and you keep everything focused and consistent, as opposed to just adding things for the sake of adding things.
Courtney, wonderful having you on the show. Thanks so much for joining. Any final thoughts or anything to plug? Obviously, everybody go check out Acquia, check out Acquia TV. Yeah, anything else?
Yeah, Acquia TV and Acquia, I think in general, just come, stop by and say hello. Yeah, so nothing else, but thank you for having me and really appreciated it. Enjoyed chatting with you both.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Oh, just leaving the witness alive, are we? Not even a threat of violence? At least take some identification and say you'll be back if he contacts the authorities. What have I become?
Well, that's it for today. I hope you got some good ideas for your B2B content. Thank you for listening to Remarkable. I'm Ian Faison, CEO of Caspian Studios. Remarkable is created by the team at Caspian Studios, B2B podcast as a service. Caspian also creates fiction series for B2B companies, so if you want a business thriller, you can learn more at caspianstudios.com. Hollywood-style storytelling for B2B. And in today's episode, you heard from myself, Ian Faison, and Meredith O'Neill, senior producer here at Caspian Studios. Remarkable was produced this week by Meredith O'Neill, mixed by Scott Goodrich, and our theme song is Solomon by Falak. Be remarkable and rise above the noise.